Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today in War Thunder we're having a look at another user model, and the model itself is the Fokker G-1. It's been made by ZiePeregrine, and there is a link in the description so you can have a look for yourself. May I just say this model is absolutely amazing. It has its full model done out, it has the flight model with it as well, it has an amazing gunner position in the back, which you'll see through the video. The actual gunner position actually turns instead of staying stationary, which is really cool. It also has a cockpit. Everything about it is absolutely wonderful. And what we're going to do in this video is go through the history of the aircraft, because obviously since it's Dutch, or from the Netherlands, it is something that's a little bit different, and as we've seen from other planes such as the IAR-81C, Radeon are looking for other nations, minor nations let's call them, to put into the game as premiums. So this plane may come in either as a German premium or even Italian premium at the end of the day, but at the moment it is just a user created model. Hopefully eventually it will get put into the game in its fullest. So the Fokker G-1, it was obviously a twin boom fuselage system. Now, something that you will realize is not a lot of twin boom designs were actually made, or at least seen as to be incredibly effective. The one which stands out above the rest is of course the P-38 Lightning, the American Lockheed plane. But throughout the war, it wasn't something that was seen as superior to other machines of its type. Now obviously in the fighter role, what you need is speed, maneuverability, and as the war goes on, high altitude performance. And the twin boom design gave you this, but it also meant it was much more expensive, and it also meant that other machines which only were single engines, such as the P-51s, the 47s, and eventually the Griffin Spitz, could do the same thing with much better, well, let's call it maneuverability. So let's talk about the design of this thing. So the Dutch Fokker G-1, it was designed by Bieling and Eric Schatzky, I believe it is, and it was designed as a fighter cruiser. And what this means is it was supposed to have a dual role. It was supposed to intercept enemy bombers and light ground supports, and also do some long distance stuff. So it was supposed to be able to be fast, firm, and also heavily armed, and be able to get up in the air pretty quickly and be able to accelerate incredibly quickly. And the Fokker G-1 was able to fit all of these roles. The one which it struggled a little bit on was its high altitude performance, but generally when we're talking about intercepting bombers and also light ground support and all of this stuff, high altitude performance is not exactly something that is really required. The Fokker G-1 was also an absolute sensation when it was introduced to the world in the 15th Paris Aeronautical Fair in 1936, so we're talking about a mid-30s aircraft here. So a lot of people are going to look at the performance of this thing and be like, well, obviously it's not very good. Well, you've got to compare it to the time. 1936 was when the early Bf-109s were being worked on. Also, this was before the time of the Spitfire, around the time of the Hurricane, the very early prototype ones, so you've got to put it into perspective when you look at this thing, and you'll realize how much of a feat it actually was. The French press also gave it a nickname, the La Voiture, which means the lawnmower, which is kind of interesting. And after its formidable nose armament, it had a ridiculous amount of 7.9mm in the nose, and the design was also revolutionary. The double boom fuselage and 8 front-end machine guns. So it was called the lawnmower because of the ridiculous armament in the front, and it was obviously designed just to, as they say, mow the lawn in that way. The fact that it had so many machine guns in the front of it was kind of funny. I suppose in the early parts of the war you can look at the Spitfires and even some of the American machines for a ton of machine guns in the front, but you generally don't think of other European nations having them, because you look at the French machines, you look at the German machines, and generally they don't have as ridiculous amounts of machine guns as some nations, and obviously the Dutch like their machine guns. The G-1 body construction, it was made of a wooden wing and a central fuselage unit in combination with a nose and boom construction of steel rods. So a mixture here, the structural strength obviously coming from the steel rods and the wood to keep it all together. The armament in itself, it had 2 batteries of 4 rapid fire machine guns. They were 7.9mm FNs, they were all in the nose, and 1 rapid fire machine gun in the rear turret. The turret that you'll see in the back is very similar to the Uhus, the Focke-Wulf 189s, where it will pivot on, the perpendicular point to where the machine gun is, and you can actually roll the whole turret around, which is really cool. The plane also was designed to be able to transport 400 kilos of internal payload, and in fact this operational option was never lifted due to lacking racks. So the plane itself, in its current state that you see in War Thunder, could not carry the 400 kilos. But they could do something like they did with the Whirlwind, where they could just add the Mark II variant, which literally just adds, weapon racks to it, and add the bomb loads to it. It won't be too hard to do. The G1 was the model that was copied in later foreign models, so the Focke-Wulf 189 Uhu, as I said, the 1937 version, and the Lockheed P-38 Lightning, also 1937. So this was definitely seen as a revolutionary design at the time, definitely to be improved upon. The Uhu was much more of a reconnaissance fighter, whereas the P-38 was obviously more of an out-and-out fighter. The earlier designs of the twin boom had been seen, but the G1 was the first one which was seen as a success in what it was supposed to do, which was this new fighter cruiser idea. And the P-38 would easily be the most successful of these twin boom designs of all of them. So if we're talking about trendsetters, the first trendsetter is of course the Fokker G-1 in this fighter cruiser idea. The G1 was also constructed in a period in which the engine manufacturers were overwhelmed with new orders. Obviously, pre-World War II, a lot of people were ramping up in aggression and also production. So, at the time, the international industry chose to dedicate its production slots to indigenous demands. And such the G1, it was fitted with second-choice Bristol Mercury engines of all things. These engines proved pretty good though, but more powerful engines would have even increased the stunning performance of the G1 in 1936. With the Mercury engines, the plane was able to reach a maximum speed of 475 kilometers an hour at 13,000 feet, which is pretty impressive for a plane from 1936. It would have been very fun to see it with some better engines, even though these engines are definitely satisfactory. The plane had also attracted international purchases in the 1936 Paris Fair, and orders were received from Spain via Estland, Denmark, which was going to be a licensed construction, and Sweden. Countries such as Hungary, Turkey, Switzerland, and Belgium had also shown interest and flew several tests and trial missions in 1939, and no actual orders were received from these countries, probably because of issues such as World War II happening. The Dutch Air Force finally purchased about 36 of the G1 Mercury versions, and these were designed to fit out 2 squadrons, so 2 sets of 12 and then 6 spares of the planes. They were delivered before the 10th of May 1940, and then there was 25 of the G1s, which were fitted with the slightly less powerful Wasp engines, which had been constructed for Spain. And these were confiscated in October 1939 by the Dutch Ministry of War, and it wasn't until April 1940 before the factual order was given to arm these planes according to Dutch specifications, which altered to only 4 instead of the 8 machine guns in the nose for the G1 Wasp version. So you had 2 versions. You had the G1 Mercury with the Bristol Mercury engines. These had the 8 7.9mm, and then you had the other one, which was the Wasp version with the Wasp engines, but it only had 4 of the machine guns. So the one that we have in game in this user model is the Bristol Mercury engines, but this means that we could have a standard tech tree one and then a premium one, something that I've always liked the idea of. And then of those 25 planes, only 3 had actually been armed before the war broke out, and an unknown number was still armed during the 5 Days War. So the majority would, however, fly with Luftwaffe crosses on their tail sections. So this is basically why it is probably better that it gets stuck either in the German tree or the Italian tree. And we'll go into that in a little bit. So let's talk about the the action that these machines saw. So the first G1 air victory was against a British Whitley bomber. The Whitley bomber is something I would love to see in the game, just because of its ridiculousness. And it's obviously a pencil bomber that could carry a ridiculous payload, but there's a lot of incredible stories behind it in books such as Yorkshire Airfields of the Second World War, where let's just say they weren't exactly the best at keeping in the air. This Whitley bomber, which was number 1357 of the 77th Squadron, it was shot down on the 28th of March 1940 over Rotterdam. Holland, which was a neutral country at the time, had the obligation to intercept any kind of intruder of the Dutch airspace, and although the Germans invaded the Dutch airspace far more often than the British, the latter were first to meet up with a G1 in a fatal engagement. So the 5 men, Whitley crew, suffered 1 fatality. 4 of the men were imprisoned and then evacuated to the UK when the war broke out in May 1940. So 1 casualty and 4 were able to get back to the UK. During the May War, which was obviously the war Germany invading the Netherlands and everybody else, the G1 proved itself a very capable fighter. Unfortunately, it was this particular modern plane that suffered the most from the German first strike. The swampy airfield Bergen, or I'm going for Bergen, just understand that I may be getting some of these pronunciations wrong. The heavy G1s had been parked on the concrete platform in front of the hangars, and rather than being spread over the swampy runways on which the heavy plane would have sunken away, when the German planes flew in from the seaside, they totally surprised the base and destroyed the majority of the modern squadron on the ground, and only 3 planes were saved, and a few others could be repaired during the war days though. So a lot of them were annihilated on the ground, which is not something you want to see when you have this interesting new plane. You don't want to see them annihilated before they can even fight back. At Volhaven, the other modern squadron of G1s had been able to scramble prior to the arrival of the massive German Air Force, but due to the loss of all larger western airfields, the planes were unable to return to a suitable landing place. Out of this squadron, only 1 plane would be saved, although only 2 had been actually shot down after the 8 planes scrambled. And as such, the German first strike had pretty much decimated the modern G1 fleet, and the remainder, which were reinforced by some operational G1 Wasps, fought intensively with the Luftwaffe and managed to claim quite a number of air victories. After the capitulation, the Germans captured a mere 20 G1 planes, and the Luftwaffe made intensive use of these planes for various training programs. There is also some strong indications that some of the G1s have even seen some actual fighter action with black crosses on their tails, to show the Luftwaffe allegiance, or the German allegiance. Also, there are indications that some Italian units have also made use of the G1 when stationed in Belgium. So, as you can see, a promising aircraft, which unfortunately was either let down I wouldn't say let down, caught off guard, I think is the better way of putting it. They were caught off guard by the attacks of the Germans before the invasion of the Netherlands, and this is something that happened a lot when it came to Europe. A lot of armies, or a lot of people, were caught off guard by the we'll call it blitzkrieg tactics, even though I don't think it's the correct word, of the Germans, and this meant that a lot of new and interesting designs from the French, from the Dutch, from the British were pretty much put to the wayside because of these attacks, and it seems like that's exactly what has happened to the G1 as well. But because it was used by the Luftwaffe, because it was also used, or maybe used, by some Italian units, and we also have the IAR 61 the IAR in the Italian tree, I don't see why this couldn't be another Italian premium of that ilk. I think it would be interesting to put into the game. It flies really well. The user model made by ZiePeregrine is not just, you know, a model flying about. There's also missions attached to it, so you can play the missions and have a little fun with it. It's a interesting design. There aren't many designs like it out there, and because of that uniqueness, because of the significance, I definitely think it should be put in the game. There's also some lovely quirks to it. As I said, the turrets, the fact that it rotates is really, really cool. The fact that everything fully works on it from a model point of view is something that is always nice to see from a flight model point of view, and I don't see why not. I don't see why not we can't have this in game. Give ZiePeregrine, you know, money for the work that is done. Let's get it into the game. Let's get it all done, and the Italians can get another premium so that they can sink their teeth into. And you know, if you don't want to give it to the Italians, give it to the Germans, because why not? It's a plane which should be in the game. It's fully ready. Let's get it in there. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.